Barrio. They sell Barrio all over the place.
I need to get some of that stuff. I know, especially since craft brewing has become so much more popular, like in the last, I'd say, decade and a half.
Oh yeah.
There's some really good stuff out there, but if you didn't go to that region, you would never know that it existed. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep. Craft brewing and man buns.
Yeah.
Good morning, DD214 fam. We are here, season 2, episode 20. Today we are joined by Amazon bestselling author, teacher, powerlifter, and family man, Chris Patterson. What's going on? How you doing today, Chris? Good morning.
Good. Doing well, thank you.
Awesome. Before we get into the good stuff, I just want to give a major shout out. We have, of course, I lost it. I did lose it. So we have a top 10 of members who. We have top 10 contributors here that I want to shout out real quick. We're going to start from number 10. I want a big thank you to John Walton, Drew Curse, Kyle Brown, Chuck Lewis, The LSG Show, Patrick Dorflin, Yvonne Bell at number 4, Chalupas Gaming at number 3, Deshaun Myers, who's here in the chat, good morning Deshaun, is at number 2, and S. Nichelle Grant is at number 1. These are our top 10 contributors. Thank you guys. We highly appreciate your love and support for the group and the channel. Well, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
All
Sorry.
right, cool. Oh yeah, you're good. You're good.
I pulled up a little bit of audio. I always pull up. I live stream but I put it on mute. I had to put it on mute. I
Oh
apologize.
yeah, no apologies.
This is why you're the producer and I'm just the guy that drinks and talks.
I
right?
will show you the way. I will show you the way. How was your week, guys?
I'll start real quick because I know we have a lot to get to with Chris. I did finally get my DD214. Obviously, we were in Kansas City last weekend, so the first day we got back, we chilled out, and then the girls went back to school on Thursday. I went straight to the fort on Thursday and got my DD214 officially, and so I'm now an official member of the DD214 club. So my service to country is basically it's not official yet. It won't be official until the 2nd of October, but unofficially I'm on terminal leave. I have a DD214 in my hand along with my leave paperwork, which means it would basically take something just shy of an act of God to get me pulled back in. So so we'll see. And we'll see. I am still in talks with the Missouri National Guard, so I haven't made a decision on that yet. But we'll see if they can dangle a big enough carrot to pay for some free community college before I use my GI Bill when I move to Kansas City later this year. So, so yeah. How was your week, Chris?
Yeah, it was good, man. We started. It was the first week of football, so I'm a football coach. I'm the head freshman football coach at the high school that I teach at, and so. It was first week, so a lot of yelling and a lot of telling kids that they're really stupid because they are. So trying to turn half humans into real humans.
That's right. That's exactly right. And John, I know you probably don't know the history of this, but me and Chris were on the wrestling team together in high school. We've known each other since junior high, but neither one of us really not very. I want to say, was there anybody in our social circle that really played football? I don't know our hardcore
Yeah, no, not really, not past our freshman year.
Not past freshman year. So yeah, so we never really played football, but Chris, after he became a teacher and became involved in the sports at different high schools, became a football coach, and actually really learned the game very fast and very well. Actually, that. Some these organizations and institutions in Arizona trusted him enough to take over a team, basically, even at the Frosh level.
I like
that's
that.
Still that's kind of a major accomplishment, especially for ones that have not. There's a lot of intricacies in football that people do not realize, and I've always wondered, Chris, what got you into the football arena where you would have to learn all the intricacies that you never really had playing. Kids grow up playing Pee Wee, Pop Warner. they have junior high leagues, and then you get to the high school level, the junior varsity and the varsity level, where by that time you're almost preconditioned to know like what's going on the field. How did you overcome that, Chris, at becoming a coach?
Sure.
And you know,
By the way, if I move, it's because I'm getting attacked by flies. Yeah, I've been a wrestling coach at Saguaro High School where I graduated for about 4 or 5 years, and at the time we had a football coach that wasn't necessarily supportive or unsupportive of wrestling, but I wanted my initial goal was to help out in the weight room and if get kids to come out for wrestling, and I knew that football was going to be kind of the avenue to do that. So I started coaching, and just started learning. I mean, I knew the general basics of football, and started learning how to coach it. And I truly believe that there are some people who go play football or any sport or an instrument, and then they can turn around and teach it to someone else. But then a lot of people that can do, but they can't teach.
Right.
So, just because someone's a journalist doesn't mean they can teach English.
Right. Very true.
So, I started, I just started learning a little bit more, and like you said, kind of some of the intricacies of football, and had an opportunity to. There was a need for head coach at Saguaro for the lower levels, and so I took that on, and then I was looking to make a change school district wise, and there was a wrestling opening over at a school called Cienega, and the new football coach over there just happened to call me up and tell me that he was also looking for a freshman football coach, and so I mean, I love coaching football. It's a lot of fun. Wrestling is my passion, but I mean, if I had to choose between the two of them, it would be wrestling, but I get a ton of kids to go out for wrestling because I coach football, and I get another opportunity to interact with kids that I otherwise wouldn't interact with on campus. And for me, because I'm not, I'm the head freshman coach, but I'm not the head coach, so it's an opportunity for me for about 3 months out of the year to not have to deal with all the bullshit that you got to deal with as a head coach, as a head coach, which I deal with in wrestling. So it's kind of a nice little break to have a little bit of control, but not have to deal with all the behind the scenes stuff that head coaches have to deal with. So
right. I want to tell a quick story too, John.
Yeah, please.
Right
I want to hear it.
Well, right before I went into the Army, and Chris will remember this. The year before I went in the Army, I helped Chris out when he was coaching wrestling at Saguaro, at our alma mater high school, basically. And I was mainly an assistant coach for the junior varsity team. And then I moved away. I moved to Kansas City for about 6 months with my first wife. And then that marriage ended very suddenly. So I kind of ran back to Arizona with my tail between my legs and realized, on that road trip, I've told the story on the podcast before, like the 2 days it took me to drive back to Arizona from Missouri, I realized I was like, well, I think I'm going to try to join the Army. I need to do something like this. Life is not working out right now. But Chris turned around and gave me the opportunity to be an assistant coach again, that for the second year in a row, basically. And this time, instead of just coaching, I started doing the practices with the kids to get myself in better shape before I went to basic training, basically. So I was able to run around the wrestling room, at 28 years old, trying to keep up with the young men in that room, but it helped get me back into better shape to go to basic and
get you ready. Yeah.
I was at, the wrestling room when you're a young man or woman in high school era, junior high, it teaches you a lot of discipline, and you learn a lot of lessons in that room. And it was really cool to experience that again as an adult prior to making a life transition such as joining the Army. So it was really neat. And Chris was part of that, basically, because he was the head coach, and he was kind of calling the shots, basically, and the school administration can't really tell him no. Like, what are they going to say no to extra help? You know what I mean?
Jay, did you do combatives while you were in?
Yeah, I did level 1 and level 2 for the Army. That's combatives. That's a whole Well, that's a can of worms, dude. We'll talk about combatives in the Army another time. Like
Yeah. On that,
I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of teaching hand-to-hand combat, and I think it's a worthy thing. But the way the Army, at least the Army, I can't really speak for the other branches. The way the Army trains it, they need some work. Put it that way. They need some work. So it's been and I've been, this has been the last almost 12 years of my life. We do so much training, but there's also so much training that we don't do, and it gets a little bit. I get flustered as an NCO sometimes, where yes, we're doing this training over here, but there's all this training over here that like is probably good to know, or at least probably have a good baseline in, and we don't.
Yeah.
And it is what it is. It is what it is.
Yep.
I mean, so.
Before I get to my week, let me just run down these. Good morning, Francesca. Deshaun Meyer says the VA just passed a policy where you can use vocational rehab without using your GI Bill, essentially getting you 8 years of college.
Right. Yeah. He's probably referring to when I was talking about the Missouri National Guard, because basically, like, I have the GI Bill, but I'm going to try to double major, so I'm going to try to get a bachelor's. I'm trying to get 2 bachelors basically instead of 1, if that makes sense. In order to do that, though, I need to get 2 associate's degrees first without using my GI Bill. So the original plan was to put myself through community college, and then transfer to a university and use the GI Bill to pursue 2 bachelor's degrees. The Missouri National Guard pays in-state tuition, so I could join the Guard for a few years and just do a weekend and a month and 2 weeks a year, and and basically get free community college before I use my GI Bill. So we'll see. We'll see if they dangle the big enough carrot.
Yep.
We'll see.
Yep.
We'll see.
And as far as my week, if you guys were watching, Chris, you look like a super evil villain right now.
Trying to figure out here.
We completely understand. No one likes a bug in their face, honestly. Actually looks kind of cool.
Yeah, it looks like that dude like in the shadows, like the mastermind behind it all. It's like he's like Kaiser Soze sitting there.
Yeah. So yeah, as you guys know, so when we finished off our last episode last week live in Kansas City, I just love saying that. We went to go see the Yankees versus the Royals. We started off over on the first base side, up on the second floor, and let me tell you, for a stadium that holds 37,000 people, you could be up in the nosebleeds, and the players, you could still make eye contact with them. You could still scream at them, and they could still hear you. Kauffman Stadium is so beautiful. The museum was amazing. Everyone was listening, was going with the rules. It was a beautiful time. My family and I, my wife and I, we highly, highly thank you for the week that you've given us, and having that experience for them, having their first base sports game, and Nikki,
Yeah.
I said you guys. I said you guys. It was a hell of an experience, and then being able to go into the Diamond Club with you, and to sit right behind where I could literally see the whites of the Yankees' eyes.
Right.
It was that was unreal. That was unreal.
The best part was it ended up being a really good game. It went to extra innings.
Yeah.
And then, I was just made aware of this little factoid a couple days ago, but apparently the Kansas City Royals set a Major League Baseball record. They erased a deficit in consecutive innings, the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th innings. They erased a deficit in all 4 of those innings. That's never happened before in baseball. But true to Kansas City Royals form, they also ended up losing the game. So,
and we were there for that history-making moment. And to my delight, the New York Yankees won.
Yes, they did. They did.
And what?
Although they played it, they played that game against the White Sox in the cornfield a couple days ago.
Did you see that? Did you see the beginning of that?
That was.
Go ahead, John.
That was amazing. What did you think about that, Chris?
Oh, that was cool. I've seen Field of Dreams before, and I know that other people have more of a sentimental reaction to Field of Dreams than I do. But it's an amazing movie. It's an iconic movie, and that was just an iconic thing that they put together with Kevin Costner. And
Oh man. Oh man.
now the Yankees lost that game, right?
Oh yeah. They lost. They lost at the very. It was like at the very. What a play too! What a play! And
It was a walk-off home run, wasn't it?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
And the funny part is, I saw this meme that said the New York Yankees are the only team in MLB history to lose a game in Iowa. And you know what? It's okay. We're the New York Yankees. We'll take good records. We'll take bad records. We'll take all of them.
Roger that. Roger that.
You know, but
I'll tell you what. The part at the very beginning when they walked out of the cornfield, like that was
touching, man. I turned around. My wife was crying.
I got chills, man. Like that's like what Chris was saying. Like that, me and my dad, like our bond is basically baseball. And so like I can't watch Field of Dreams without turning into a fucking sobbing mess at the end. Like where he's like, "Hey, Dad, you want to have a catch?" You know, it's like, and you just find me in the corner somewhere crying. You know what I mean? Like, because that movie means a lot. You know what I mean? So to have them do that was really, it's kind of special that they did that. So.
Yeah. And you know the drive back home was definitely longer than the drive going over there, but you know we did the drive. We got back home. There was like this strong feeling of relief once we got out of Illinois, because that was the game changer. That state is hell to drive through, and Indiana. And then once we got to like Ohio, we're like, oh, Ohio. And then we hit Pennsylvania. And we're just like, yes. And then we stopped in Pennsylvania, and we were just like, okay, we're stopping for a little bit. And we stopped, and we're back home. And I'm still living in the moment. I'm going to work listening to Kansas City on iTunes, you know.
So.
And I have to say, the Rufus Teague barbecue sauce is the best barbecue sauce I've ever had in my life.
Nice.
That's the canned one, the barbecue in the can.
One in the can.
Yeah, that was delicious. I had it with the finest meats from McDonald's. You know, and it that was great. That was great. The Jack Stack hot one, I didn't realize it was going to be hot sauce, but it's good, man. But again, thank you. I have about 300 pictures that I'm sending you in your email today.
Good.
I hope that your computer doesn't fry up because of it.
No, this is a fairly new laptop, so it should be able to. I'm actually getting ready to purge a bunch of Army stuff off my laptop because I had to get this laptop last year actually because my previous laptop it still works, but it was taking a big crap, and because we were doing everything virtually, I needed a better system basically, and so I basically have a functionally a new laptop now that hopefully should last another. I pray like 4 or 5 years at least, because I don't really use my laptop for anything other than business or work basically, if that makes sense. So yeah, but no, we were
everything else with your phone. So
well, we had a great time, and we were happy to have you. I'm glad you got to experience the place of my birth, you know, and it's gonna be my home. In about another 4.5 months, or excuse me, 3.5 months. So we're looking forward to getting back out there for good. And yeah. Oh, and by the way, remember I kept telling you, like, because I grew up in Arizona, I'm like a rain curse. Like a day after I left, like they had a badass storm there in Kansas City. And then like Chris is saying, like Tucson's getting storms right now. Like I'm in Colorado with no rain, just no thunder, no rain, no nothing for Jay. Like I'm just.
Don't feel so bad. We don't even got a cloud in the sky. So,
what's up, Joe Poe? What's up, man?
What's going on, Joe? So now, before we get into Chris, real quick, if you guys been watching the news, unfortunately, the Taliban has, as the news is saying, has taken another trophy. They've taken another one of their capital cities, and as of this morning, the news is reporting that they're moving in comfortably. As you said, the president resigned.
Yeah, the president of Afghanistan is either there's varied reports right now, but he is either prepping to, or he has already announced his resignation. Like they're just the Afghanistan government is effectively rolling over and showing their bellies to the Taliban. So it's happening. I know I've seen a lot of stuff on my Facebook feed and on Reddit the last two to 3 days. Before I say anything that comes from my own personal opinions, I want to preface all of this by saying that if you're a veteran and if you serve time in Iraq and Afghanistan, it's okay to have certain feelings and feel a certain way about this. I don't want to take away from anybody's feelings. Your feelings are valid. So I've seen a lot of comparisons to the Vietnam War regarding our conflict and our war. For me personally, this is again just me personally. This is my opinion. I'm not sure what anybody else really expected. Having been in Afghanistan 3 times, um, at least for me, the writing was on the wall a long, long time ago, and I don't know what else anybody expected. Even especially after when we left Iraq in 2013, 2014 time frame, and basically the same exact thing happened. And ISIS came in and filled a vacuum, so we went back in, helped stamp ISIS out for the most part, and reclaim a lot of what they had taken. I don't know what anybody expected. I really don't. I understand the feelings of loss and the feelings of what the hell was this for, I guess, to an extent. But for me personally, when I signed up, I knew what I was signing up for. I don't know what anybody else really truly expected. Like, if you ever went on mission with the ANA, if you ever saw how the country operates, on like a day-to-day, like between the cities and the rural areas, if you've ever been to that country and seen how it operates, you kind of just knew it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Like this, like whatever. We went in there primarily to find and eliminate Osama bin Laden, take away any governmental support for terrorist organizations. We accomplished those missions quite a long time ago, actually. Now, 20 years later, the Taliban are moving back in, which I remember reading newspaper stories from 03, 04 when we first started going into Iraq that both conflicts were going to be open-ended and, unwinnable scenarios, basically. Whatever, dude. Politicians and the people way, way, way above my pay grade in the military are the ones that lost this war. We never lost a single pitched battle against any force of size on that battlefield in 20 years. We walked across that battle space and did whatever the fuck we wanted for 20 years. So we literally went into their country and we turned it into the fucking biggest episode of the Hunger Games you've ever fucking seen and did whatever the fuck we wanted for 20 years. That's not a loss in my opinion. Okay? You can blame the politicians, you can blame the generals, and I'm looking forward to reading some books in the next like 10 to 20 years over like all the things that, probably could have been done a little bit better. But as far as like if you were boots on the ground in Afghanistan, I don't care what your MOS is or what branch you serve with, you didn't lose that war. Okay? You guys did not lose that war. I didn't lose that war. Okay? You can blame policy and you can blame geopolitics for that shit. So don't feel bad. Pick your heads up, harden the fuck up. Jesus hates a pussy, dude, so don't be one. All right? We didn't lose that war. We beat the fucking piss out of them every goddamn time they met us on the battlefield. So don't feel bad, kids. All right? Keep your heads up, all right? Crack a beer. Right now, today I'm drinking. Go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
As a civilian, I never had the balls to join the military like you or my brother or both my brother-in-laws. But, and as a history teacher, when you look at the history of that region, dating all the way back to, even the turn of the, BCE to CE or BC to AD, it's just a region that's really difficult to control. The Mongols gave up, the Indians gave up. Even when I think historically, if you take a look at a country like Russia or the Soviet Union, when they can't subjugate a people and they're ruthless, I don't quite know. And again, I understand the reasoning behind going in to Afghanistan, and I don't disagree with those reasons. But the end result is almost hard to think that there was going to be any other end result. And the other issue is you're dealing with fundamental Islam versus secularized, modernized Islam that you might find in other parts of the world, in Europe and the United States.
Absolutely.
And, fundamental Islam wraps every aspect of life up in their fundamentalist ideas. And so, politics, family life, family structure, religion, they're all the same, where, you could have two conservatives in the United States, one's Jewish, one's Christian, and then you got a third one that's an atheist. They all have the same political beliefs, but they all have different religious beliefs. And when that's not allowed to occur, um, you know, I mean, it creates these situations of genocide or fratricide that we commonly see in not just Afghanistan, but in other areas, especially in the Middle East, some parts of Southeast Asia, and even into Africa, where you have, again, non-secularized fundamental Islam. So I'm not trying to talk shit about Islam at all, right?
No. But let's be real. For the last 20 years, that's been kind of like the hot button, issue that militaries, not just the United States military, but militaries around the world have had to face off
Yeah,
against, basically.
and it's a losing. I mean, you would, in essence, and of course I'm not proposing this, but in essence you would have to completely destroy that particular sect or denomination of Islam in order to stop the
Right.
Taliban from doing what they're doing. It's just, just their ideology is they're not going to stop. And I really feel bad of you, Jason, my brother-in-law, my brother, um, you know guys, other friends of mine who have done, some of them have done 6 or 7 deployments in the Middle East. And I agree with you. It's definitely not their fault that this is happening, but there's a part of me that feels my heart goes out to them, because and again, I don't know what this feels like, but how do you look at what's going on, and you spent time and money and blood and tears and lost friends over there, and I can only imagine that some people are looking at this and going, why
Right.
why were we even there in the first place? And I can't even, I mean, again, I can't even imagine what that feels like. I mean, I can't even imagine what it feels like, especially when people are losing loved ones. And yeah, I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you what, Chris, and again, and this is exactly why I prefaced my earlier statement by saying that people's feelings are valid with this. You're probably gonna run a very wide swath of different opinions and different ideas, especially coming from the veteran community, people that have been there, people that serve there, people that lost people there, all that stuff. I guess I'm choosing to, pull from the glass is half full, pile of cards, because I didn't join the Army till I was 29, so I wasn't fresh out of high school. I didn't necessarily drink the Kool-Aid when I joined the Army. I kind of knew what was going on in the Middle East. I had you and me were 20 years old when 9/11 happened. We were already adults when 9/11 happened. And that was 20 years ago. So I didn't really hold any illusions that we were there to win a war. We were there to do whatever the mission was in that moment that we were there. And then when that mission was over and we were there for a year or there for 9 months, we come home. Like I said, this was up to the politicians. This was up to the generals. I don't want to necessarily disparage or name drop, but I mean, all you got to do is read the rosters from the last 20 years of our presidents and Congress, the gentlemen and women who were leaders of our armed forces in the last 20 years. I mean, they set the policy, they dictate it. So whatever the mission was for that set of years, and then Afghanistan just kept going on. So this is our mission for 3 or 4 years. Okay, this is our mission for the next 8 years. Mm-hmm. This is our mission for the next 4 years. And now all of a sudden it's 2021 and we're just now barely pulling out. And it's been less than a month. It's going to be the 20-year anniversary of 9/11.
Right.
So I don't personally harbor any, ill feelings towards it. I feel like a lot of the losing people sucks. Losing people. That's probably the hardest part of being in the military, is losing people. But I don't like seeing it when people say it was all in vain or this or that. It really reminds me a lot of what you read about with Vietnam.
Sure.
But there was a huge difference though, there was a huge culture shift. After 9/11, I go out in public in my uniform, people fucking thank me for my service, and I'm like, I'm just doing a job. This is just my job, and I appreciate it. I appreciate that they care. The Vietnam veterans didn't have that. The Vietnam veterans didn't have some of the really cool toys that we get to play with. They were going into jungle. I was showing John, me and John in Missouri, I showed John this little area behind a cemetery that my family has. And the woods are so thick you can't see 10 feet inside these woods, and that's like, imagine fighting a war like that. That was Vietnam.
Right.
You know, somebody could literally be 10 feet away from you pointing a gun at you, and you wouldn't know it until it was too late. You know, a lot of Afghanistan and Iraq really weren't like that in the rural areas. In the urban areas, it's a little different, but in the rural areas, you can see for miles. You know, we're more worried about roadside bombs than we are getting attacked, because you can see people coming from miles away. And you know, to feel like things are in vain or whatever, like, no, we did our job, and it was a job, and we don't have a conscription force anymore. We don't draft anymore. So for any veteran during GWOT, during the Global War on Terror, be proud and hold your head high, because you volunteered and you did your part, and you took the place of somebody who not only probably didn't want to be there, but probably didn't belong there. You know, and there were a lot of young men and women in the Vietnam conflict that did not have that choice. They were drafted, and they were told, like, you're going to Southeast Asia. You know, so I try to take a little bit more of an optimistic approach to it, but I definitely understand where there might be a lot of people that are having a lot of ill feelings right now watching the fall of Kabul right now, the capital. So yeah.
Very interesting stuff. Now, let's get to the meat and potatoes here. So, Chris, you have created the Dreamwalker Chronicles.
Yeah.
Which, from what I'm seeing, you're up to book 5.
Yeah. So I'm done with book 6, and we were supposed to release last month. There was a hiccup on Amazon's side, so when it comes to ebooks, I'm solely on Amazon. Amazon is kind of like the Monsanto of everything that's not food. So if you're an author and you're not with one of the big 5, so that would be like Penguin or Del Rey or one of those large publishers, Amazon is kind of the way to go for right now. Anyways, there was a little bit of a hiccup with my pre-release, and then we had some editing issues that we had to take care of. So should be by the end of this month, I'll have book 6 out, and then I just released just an ebook box set of my first 3 books called Shadows Fire. That is the name of my first. I've kind of organized it a little oddly, I guess. It's the Dreamwalker Chronicles, but then each 3 books is a series also unto itself. So I have the Shadows Fire series, the Demons Fire series. I'm working on the next 3 books, which will be the Dragons Fire series. And so yeah. So
Chris, you became a fantasy author, and I remember from, I guess, what you would call our teen years or our semi-childhood, that you were into fantasy books. You and me were both readers, but our reading habits, our reading for fun habits were a little bit different. So tell me what's some of the fantasy books that, I guess, inspired you, and then as you became a writer in your adult years, what were the fantasy series that really, I guess, stoked a fire inside you, that when you started writing fantasy, like, that was your inspiration, I guess? Like, where did you delve your inspiration from?
So I think for our generation, a lot of fantasy, if you're going to be a fantasy author, a lot of influence obviously comes from the Lord of the Rings. I read The Hobbit.
But we didn't have that. We didn't have that when we were teenagers, though, did we?
Well,
I mean, there was like one book out, right? There was like one book out at the time, maybe.
Oh no, the Lord of the Rings was written in 1958, I think.
I'm sorry, I was talking about Game of Thrones. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah. So I think early on, Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien was a huge influence, and I also grew up reading Ursula K. Le Guin and her Wizard of Earthsea series, which is kind of a cool, more young adult fantasy series. And my dad and my uncle were really into fantasy, and I played Dungeons and Dragons when I was a kid and shit like that. So yeah, that was kind of my influence. And I think with any craft, you got to realize that you want to make it your own, but at the same time you have all these different influences. And so as I got older, and I was a musician for a little while, I thought I wanted to be a professional musician. That didn't work out, so I decided I wanted to write. So then I started pulling from some other influences like George R. R. Martin and Game of Thrones or Song of Ice and Fire. There's another author. He's also an indie author, so he's an independently published author, but he's just doing so well right now. His name is David Estes, and he wrote the Fate Mark series, which is really, really good. So I started reading. I started kind of branching out away from Lord of the Rings because I feel like in the world of fantasy you get people who are Lord of the Rings buffs, and you kind of get pigeonholed, and you only ever write to that. And I think one of the cool things about fantasy is you can write about, some of the stuff we've just been talking about. You can write about geopolitical issues. You can write about religion. You can write about racial issues. You can write about social issues. But because in most cases it's a made-believe world with make-believe characters and races that don't actually exist, you can do it in a very kind of clandestine way,
Right.
So you can, and I, one of the labels that I've given myself is Christian fantasy.
Okay.
And I mean the Christian fantasy in the sense that, I mean, I am a Christian author, but at the same time I have a clear cut delineation between good and evil. There's my main character believes in a monotheistic, Christ-like God, but it's still all made believe, So,
Right.
you get to kind of explore things like that in fantasy without rubbing as many people the wrong way, because that's, I mean, quite honestly, as an artist, you got to think, okay, if I write a song that, I think Jason, you and I both really like Rage Against the Machine, but
Absolutely.
one of the things I can't listen to too much Rage because all of a sudden I feel like I'm at a political rally, and I just get irritated, which is all good. I mean, that's their right, and that's, their music is still good, but I think as an artist you have to take those things into consideration, and so.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, and C.S. Lewis did it with the Chronicles of Narnia. I mean, he was a Christian fantasy author basically, and he took the allegory, I guess, the allegory of the tale of Christ basically, and turned it into this long fantasy series.
Yeah.
I mean, that's and he did that. How many decades ago was that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Hasn't been 100 years yet, but we're encroaching. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
So I mean, it's like, what is it? They say nothing new under the sun, right? You have to find your way or your path, I guess, in that genre.
I
right?
tell students all the time that want to write, and they find out that I'm a writer, and they ask me about, and I always tell them, like, look, you're never going to tell a brand new tale, right? I mean, all stories are going to be about an external journey and an internal journey.
Right.
And, it's just how can you make your story unique for you? It's like, there's really no new story. It's just people repackaging it in a way that's unique to them and, hopefully to enough people to make it worth their while.
Well, there's a little minor factoid that a lot of people aren't aware of. William Shakespeare, good old Bill Shakespeare, for all the plays that he wrote, and that he's world renowned and famous for, for all time, only one of his stories is considered an original story. There's only one play. It's called The Tempest, and The Tempest is it's considered to be the only original Bill Shakespeare story. So out of all of his other plays, Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, Othello, all those other stories,
The Tempest
is the only one that's really considered.
Yeah, that's actually my favorite. That's my favorite Shakespeare one too. The Tempest.
What, The Tempest?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Good for you for knowing Shakespeare. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I didn't even know that was considered his only original one.
That's like his only. Yeah, that's like Shakespeare's Tarantino. Like, that's his only original. Like, Chris, we have a question here from Deshaun Myers.
Yes, we do.
Who is your favorite character in your series and why?
Man, so my main character, Eric, is I mean, I guess probably my favorite character because he's my main protagonist. And I wrote him from one of the things that I tried to do when I was writing about Eric was he's a younger brother. I happen to be the older brother. So there were times when I tried to think about what was it like growing up with an older brother who was younger in life, and so I tried to encounter that from that perspective. I really like I really like what I've done with Eric's journey through these last 6 books and his maturity. But then there's another character that I really like writing, and he's a supporting character. His name is Andragos. He's a wizard, a necromancer, and
Nice.
for the first,
Nice.
I no spoilers, but he also has a character development story that I really enjoy. The other thing when I got to writing, I think one of the things that happens in fiction tales is you have clear cut good and clear cut evil, and I think that's a good thing. I think that's good for readers, and I think from a morality standpoint, I think that there are definitely people in this world, in our own world, that are clearly good and clearly evil, but the vast majority of my characters are somewhere in between. They have character flaws that to some people would make them the enemy, and then positive things that make them friends to other people. And so I think with Andragos, that's what I really try to play with him is, yeah, he's a terrible person called the harbinger of death to some people, but then to other people, he's a savior. And so I like writing that. I like writing through that
Hmm.
that internal
Very,
conflict.
very interesting.
I love it. I love it. And I think that also speaks a lot to how many shades of gray are really kind of omnipresent in life. Where it's like we can talk about good and we can talk about evil, but when you get down to brass tacks, like average Joe, average Jane, there's going to be this spectrum of gray where it's like you might be kind of a piece of crap in your regular day-to-day life, but people don't see behind the scenes when you go home to like the wife and kids,
Yeah.
or they don't see behind the scenes when you're actually pulling strings from the top to make a lot of better stuff happen for people, you know, I guess subservient or subordinate to you.
That
And we
reminds
used to, go ahead, John.
that reminds me a lot of like how a lot of people view Che Guevara as well. How some people see him as this monster, but other people see him as this revolutionary hero.
Well, and history gets a lot of history gets whitewashed as and this is not just from one side or the other. Like, pretty much any political, I guess, ideology will whitewash the stuff they don't really want people
Well,
to think about as often, right?
that's
Like,
the things
go
that
ahead,
we would talk about in my history classes when I
Chris,
still
go ahead. I
taught.
want to hear. I want to hear your thoughts.
I you know I with my students, we used to talk about, like, clearly from an American perspective, if we take a look at a war like World War II, which in my opinion has definite clear cut good guys and clear cut bad guys, in the sense that Nazi Germany was engaging in things that 99.9% of the world would consider evil. But
Mhm.
even in a war like that, if you take a look at the common German person, their hero was, was the Third Reich. Their hero was Hitler, and we were the enemy. We were the bad guys. And so one of the things that we really got away from in my history class, and trying to be as non-biased as possible, was we got to get away from, in many cases, saying, oh, they were our enemy and therefore they're bad. In many cases, especially just, and you guys as veterans know more than I do in this, the boots on the ground are just people,
That's
and
correct.
Yeah.
they may be directed by people who are truly bad and evil, but the people on the ground are just people. And I think as an author, I get a real opportunity to explore that reality in a make believe world, and so I can touch on that a little bit more than someone who's writing historical fiction or writing a action book that takes place in our world. And it's hard. It's a hard concept to wrap your mind around. Like yeah. I just there's a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of shades of gray in between. The few people here and there that you could honestly say are truly good or truly evil.
Right. Right.
We
We have
actually,
another.
yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Deshaun Myers asks also, when you write, do you have like some sort of ritual you use to get in the mood, to get in the zone, or do you write whenever you feel a good form of progression?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think the short answer is it depends. But as I've progressed and matured in my writing, I definitely have more of a process that I go through in terms of how I prep a story, how I outline, and the world in the community, in the writing community. You have what are called plotters and pantsers, and a plotter is someone who will sit down and basically outline their whole book before they start. A pantser is someone who just writes by the seat of their pants. And I definitely used to be a pantser, and now I'm more of a plotter, just because I see the value in that. But you know, I still have a full time job. Before COVID hit, I was actually making about as much money as I was making as a teacher in my writing, and so I thought maybe there was this moment where I could go full time, but COVID kind of fucked that up. But we most of us who are writers also have full time jobs, and so you really have to find any opportunity you can. Uh, and if I ever find those opportunities and I'm just not feeling it, there's a couple things I'll do. Certain types of music will kind of get the creative juices flowing, so I'll throw on, some music, or even watch like a video clip of something that might be, maybe I'm getting ready to write a battle scene, so I'll watch a short clip from some battle scene from one of the Lord of the Rings movies or something like that. Um, but yeah, I think for most people, it's you just got to find the time when you can. I know for my full time author friends, they treat it like a full time job. They get up at a certain time and they write until a certain time. And I think for someone who does want to go full time, which is a goal of mine eventually, you have to treat it like that. Um, otherwise it's going to just continue to feel like a hobby. And I mean, let's be
Well, I
honest,
mean,
full
Stephen
time money.
Stephen King is a heavy advocate for writing every day. If you're going to be a writer, you write every day, and
Yeah.
he's a huge advocate for that. Like one of the best books I've ever read on how to write or how to become a writer is by Stephen King. It's called On Writing, and that is probably one of the single best books I've ever read on like just the process of writing. And
Yeah.
he's a huge advocate of you have to write every day, even if it's just 100 words that you word vomit into your laptop or onto paper. At least you wrote something that day, basically.
I think even going back, like let's say you just wrote a chapter, go back and edit your chapter. Like maybe at the moment the creative juices are kind of stopped up and you don't have anything new to write. So take that opportunity to go back and review some of the stuff you've already written. I personally chunk everything up into percentages. So I go 10%, 25%, 50, 75, 90, and then 100. And so every time, once I get to that 10% landmark, I'll go back and read through my 10%. And that'll take a day's worth of writing, and that's okay. And then when I get to 25, I'll go from 10 to 25 and read through it. And, it's kind of the process that I've gotten to. So.
Do you utilize an editor or do you edit your own stuff?
No, I self edit before I send it to an editor, but you know,
Are you
in
are you surprised with the stuff that comes back after you? So like you already edited your own stuff, and then are you ever surprised like when they send it back and they're like, you missed this or you missed that, or there was a typo here, like whatever, like.
so I think at first the editor I used, a guy named Graham Schofield, um, very cool guy, British guy, lives in the Philippines. He I think when I first started working with him, and I had already published A Chance Beginning, and then he went back and we made a lot of changes to it because he edited it for me. At first, I was pretty surprised, but at this point, I'm not surprised anymore. I have 5, almost 6 books in Dreamwalker Chronicles, and then I have a standalone historical fantasy fiction. He's done all of those, and I know, and I'm glad I have them. It's hard when you've got yourself or just a friend who's willing to edit for you. They just don't have the editing eye that you need, and so I obviously pay Graham to edit for me, but it's well worth it. I mean, and independently published authors, you're already running under the stigma that your stuff is garbage, it's not as good, that's why a publisher hasn't picked you up, all that kind of junk. And so I think that independent authors especially need to make sure that their stuff is crisp and it's good and it's professional. And so that's why I think hiring an editor is important. And you can find, I pay Graham well because he's very good. But you can find editors out there on Fiverr or something like that are good. And they're not going to be super expensive, especially if you're just starting out and you got a small budget. I'm fortunate enough that, at the moment, I make just enough to cover my marketing and some of my content editing stuff. But when you're just starting off and money's tight, you got to find what you can. And yeah, Fiverr is a great place to find cover artists and editors.
Fiverr, is that? Can you spell that out for the people that never heard of it? Is it just spelled out?
It's fiverr.com.
Okay.
There's all kinds of, I even have a Fiverr profile for people who need formatting. I have some professional software that I've purchased in the past that will format your book for both paperback and ebook, and so it looks professional. It looks like professionally, printed. And so I've helped a couple authors with formatting, and they send me their manuscripts, and I go through and put it together and make sure that it looks professional. But Fiverr's just the guy that did my audiobooks, Amrit Sandhu, is the narrator for my audiobooks. He picks up a bunch of work, voiceover work in Great Britain through Fiverr. So it's a really good for anyone who's an artist or has some sort of skill that leans in that direction, even if it's like music production. I've seen people who do music production post their stuff on Fiverr. The guy who's done the cover artwork for my last 3 books, and then he's redoing the cover artwork for my first 3 books, I found him on Fiverr. He does original artwork. It's amazing. So Fiverr's pretty good.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
awesome. Go ahead, John.
We have another question from Deshaun Myers. He's killing them with kindness today.
Awesome.
What was the hardest part of getting your book to become more than just an idea in your head?
Oh man, well I think there's 2 separate answers to that. Number one is believing that you can actually write a book. I think when it comes to art, whether it's physical art, music, the written word, producing a movie, there's this still this prevailing old school mentality, even though more and more we see independently published authors, independently produced musicians, independent films win awards. There's this prevailing mentality that I'm just a normal person and my ideas aren't worth anything. So I think the first part is getting over the idea that I can't write a book, and I believe that anyone who really wants to can. The other thing that you have to remember is, your story is not going to be everyone's story. There are friends of mine who don't like my books, and that's okay. It's just not their cup of tea, and there's nothing wrong with that. And, I've even asked people to give me critical reviews on Amazon, a 2 or a 3-star review, because maybe the writing, it was well written, but they just don't like the story. Now, you get those, not to segue, but you get those 1-star reviews. Like, I got a 1-star review one time, and it was, I would sooner crumple up a $20 bill and throw it in the trash can than spend another 99 cents on this book.
Oh,
which makes it, well,
Jesus.
it makes it laugh because it shows me that guy is just a troll out there to,
right.
Most critical reviews on Amazon have some sort of positive criticism to them. So that's number one, just believing that you can put pen to paper or sit at your computer and actually write. But then the other part of that is figuring out what your writing process is. I would suggest to any new author that you need to figure out what kind of outlining process works best for you. And I really like a guy named Michael Hague, Hauge. He's a guy who has done predominantly screenwriting outlining, the classic 3-act outline.
Nice.
But he's retooled it for fiction authors. And that is the formatting system or the outlining system that I use. And it's the Michael Hague 3-act 6-plot system.
Yeah.
It breaks everything up into percentages. And so, yeah, it's just sitting down and putting your ideas down on paper and then looking at how you're going to organize them. And then lastly, I think the last part of that is you have to have thick skin and you have to crave criticism. When I finally hired Graham to do my editing, the first thing he told me was, I love your story. I haven't typically edited fantasy, but I want to work with you. The first thing you need to do is cut out the first 3 chapters of your book. And as I'm reading that,
how do you even quantify that?
Well, so what's funny about that is I have learned early on that, criticism is good, even though sometimes it's hard to stomach. My wife, as I'm reading it, is standing over my shoulder, and she looks at me. She goes, "Fuck that guy," But I ended up cutting out the first 3 chapters, and it made my story better. So you have to crave criticism. I mean, if someone comes back and says, "Hey, I really like your story," you do a beta read, which means you find some people that are willing to read your book and just give you feedback before you're ready to publish. If they say, "Hey, I really like your book, but this character is kind of flat," and then you start arguing with them about that, well, then you really don't want criticism. You're just looking for praise, and that's never going to work. That's never going to create a good piece of artwork.
Yeah. I do need to interject here too, because you kind of mentioned that you have friends that aren't necessarily a fan. I want to go specifically on record right now and state that, like, I was never able to get through your first book, but that was not your fault. Like, there's a lot of things that happened after I joined the Army where I lost a lot of my hobbies. I lost a lot of my passions, in keeping with basically just keeping up with the Army, basically. And John, you'll probably get a kick out of this. I have a dog-eared copy of Chance's Fire, which is the very first book that Chris wrote. And it's a first edition. So when Chris gets world famous someday for his writing, there's a dog-eared copy that I'm going to sell for like $100,000. I'll be like, this book has been to the field. This book has been to Afghanistan. Like, it looks like it's been read 500 times.
Yeah.
But I was never able to make it all the way through, because as soon as I would start, something would pop up. I go off to the races. 2 days or 2 weeks or 2 months later, I still haven't gotten to the next part, so I have to reread what I just read. I still to this day have never, and I'm looking forward to this. One of the things I'm looking forward to very much, especially now having my DD214 officially, I actually just started last night. I was FaceTiming with my girlfriend, and she was watching some TV, and I was like, "Is it okay if I just read?" And so we sat on FaceTime, and she watched TV, and I read a book. I finally started reading again. I haven't read, or I used to write a lot too. I haven't read or written anything in almost 12 years because Army.
Right.
I got so hyper focused on my job, basically. I lost some of these passions in my life. And it's not that I didn't like Chris's writing, because Chris is one of my best friends. I would have loved to have given you an honest critique of A Chance's Fire. How many years ago was that? It's been over a decade. It's been 13 or 14 years probably.
2012, 2013, and then it's gone through.
Yeah,
it's gone through 4 revisions. And
well, I want to say you gave me that book. I don't know if you gave me that book when I was in Tucson for Pablo's wedding. Maybe was that December of 12? Would it have been out then?
I think that's probably right.
Yeah. So like, and at that point, I'd only been in the Army for a little over, or no, he got married in 2011. It was before I went to Afghanistan. Yeah. So like, yeah. So since 2011, I've had this one copy of this one book of Chris's, and I have not been able to really touch it other than making sure it was in my stuff basically.
Yeah.
When I go train or I go to Afghanistan. But it wasn't because I didn't like your writing. It was because Army. And I'm totally going to blame the Army on that. So
So I have a question. And we actually have another question from Deshaun, which is actually a question I was going to ask. But you had mentioned the Hague system. I'm actually slightly familiar with it. So do you write your books in a script format before you finalize it?
So that's a really good question. My plotting system, what I'll do is I'll sit down, and normally I'll take about a day, and when I say a day, I'm probably a couple hours, depending on what's going on, and I'll write just a brief 2 to 3 paragraph overview of what my book is going to be about. And then the Hague system, what it does is it breaks everything up. It's got a 3-act system, but then it breaks everything up into percentages. So the first 10% of your book or screen, whatever you're doing, is like the setup. And so I'll write down just a quick 2, 3, 4 sentences. This is what happens at 10%. Protagonist is presented with an opportunity. My very first book, A Chance Beginning, Eric Eliota, my main protagonist, is presented with an opportunity to either go on a journey or go back home. And so that's the first checkpoint. And then 25% is another opportunity. 50% is it's called the no turning back. 75% is a major setback. And so what I'll do is I'll literally write down, and I use a writing program called Scrivener. And Scrivener it just helps organize chapters and sections a little bit better than Microsoft Word. And then you can directly export it to Word. And so, I'll highlight sections. This is 25%. Just write down what's going to happen. And so now I know I have a focus point. I have an aiming point at where I need to get. And then I just, and then what I'll do is I'll go in and I'll go, okay, most of my books are somewhere around 70 to 80 chapters. So 10% would be 8 chapters. I'll outline each chapter up to 8 chapters, and then I'll write them. And then I'll go, okay, 10 to 25%. How many chapters is that? Roughly up to chapter 20. So chapters 9 through 20, I'll outline them, and then I'll write them. And that's kind of how I process and outline. And so not necessarily in screen.
So is it like that? Is it like that meme from It's Always Sunny with the dude with the cigarette and he's pointing at the wall all crazy? When you're trying to when you're trying to connect plot lines and how do you keep all those George R.R. Martin? It's very famous in the Game of Thrones series. It's very famous. This dude painted himself into a corner. He had hundreds of named characters.
Yeah.
Trying to keep all that stuff together and the different plot lines, and this very, very, very minor sub character actually has a big moment, in this part of the story. How the fuck do you keep that shit together in your head? How do you keep that shit together?
So it's gotten to a point, and that's one of the reasons why I use Scrivener. Scrivener actually has this amazing format where you can, and again, it takes time, and a lot of writers don't want to take time to do this, but this is why you'll pick up a book and that's been published, but you see a clear contradiction in the book. Scrivener allows you to write character profiles, add pictures. My main character in my head, I'm envisioning a guy that looks like, I don't know, Liam Hemsworth. Okay, so I'll put a picture of Liam Hemsworth next to him that constantly reminds me, okay, this is what he looks like physically, and she looks like I don't know, Liv Tyler because she's an elf, and
nice,
or whatever, and
nice.
So yeah, it's difficult, and you're right. I mean, a guy like George R.R. Martin, I think one of the things that has happened with him is he's got this monster, this beast that now he's got to try to close up.
He's done, dude. He's not finishing those books. Like the dude's not finishing those books, dude.
Because he's the peak of physical health. So this guy's gonna drop anytime soon.
I read every single one of those books on my first deployment. This is from June of 2011 to June of 2012. Okay, he has not released another one since. I just want to throw that out there. The dude is not finishing the series.
Dance of Dragons, yeah. So
yeah, the dude is not finishing the series. It's over. It's fucking over. It's as over as Afghanistan right now.
Well, it's like Wheel of Time series. I mean, Robert Jordan had 11 books in the Wheel of Time series.
Right.
He kept saying he was going to be finished, and then he died. And thank God for Brandon Sanderson, who came in. And Brandon Sanderson's another guy who. He's a guy that I didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to back in the day, but Brandon Sanderson is a guy who interjects. He's Mormon, so he interjects a lot of his faith background into his books without putting it in people's faces. He uses a fantasy world to do that. Just a phenomenal, for someone who is really wants to get into, like Deshaun is asking some great questions. I mean. And Brandon Sanderson, not only would I read his books, but he's got a blog and he's got a lecture series on YouTube. Some lectures he did at BYU about his writing process, which is amazing. And again, not necessarily, do I suggest follow every single thing he says, but just great information.
Sure. Well, and Joe Poe just commented that he's just happy that Stephen King finished the Dark Tower series, and the ending was kind of garbage though. And I know you, Chris, you know this from growing up with me that I was a huge Stephen King and a Dark Tower fan when we were kids. And I remember waiting several years for the next book to come out. And then when we were seniors, Stephen King got hit by a van in Maine walking on the side of his road.
Oh, wow.
And almost died. And that actually spurned him to finish his series and finish basically what amounted to his magnum opus. Basically, that was his swan song was The Dark Tower. And I have they've since made comic books. They've made a dog shit movie that I refuse to fucking watch. Like I'm not even going to fucking talk about the movie because it was fucking garbage. But he had this like ginormous, world that he had created, but he was kind of stuck in that writer's block. And we can talk about George R. R. Martin, Stephen King before he finished the Dark Tower series. And oftentimes you see writers get stuck kind of like they kind of paint themselves into corners, really, and it's like they don't know what to do. And that's really where that question stemmed from, because I know, especially in fantasy, like I can think of 100 different short stories to write, but it's a short story. Right. So if I write somewhere between 2 and 20 pages, story's done.
Well, I know
and there's not a lot to keep together. You write a fantasy, a very epic fantasy series, you're going to get new characters, you're going to get old characters, you're going to get characters that came in somewhere around like the 3rd or 4th book, but then maybe they take greater prominence. And that's why I've always wondered, like, how the fuck do you guys keep all that shit together in your head? Because I don't know about you, Chris, but you've known me long enough. My head's full of like broken glass right now, dude. So I'm like, I got to write everything down. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Like,
well, I'm not the best at taking notes, and that's probably one thing within my writing that I could do a lot better. Is that jot down notes. I got this idea. I'm terrible at that, and there's been so many times where I'll sit down at the computer and I'll start to write, and I'm like, fuck, I had this great idea, and I can't even remember it now. So that's one area where I could do better. But the writer burnout is pretty real too. I've got a really good friend. He lives here in Tucson. Eric T. Knight is his name. And he has written several fantasy series that are all based in the same world, but slightly different timelines and character lines. And he wrote, I think he's got a total of 25 books now, but he wrote like 12 of those books within a year, And for independently published authors, one of the again, not to get on a tangent, but one of the philosophies with an independently published author is what's called a rapid release. So can you write 3 or 4 books and then release them all within a month of each other. So over the next 4 months, you'll release 4 books. And the reason that is because as an independently published author, you're not getting any sort of advance from a publishing company. They'll advance you anywhere between 10 to, big time authors, $100,000, $200,000. And so you can take time and publish 1 book a year. And so for an indie author, it's all about volume. In fact, there's an organization out there called 2250K. 2250K books means write 20 books, and on average, you'll make $50,000 a year. And so, George R.R. Martin has only written 5 books. He's a multimillionaire. J.R.R. Tolkien has a.
He's written more. He's written more than that, but those are the books those are the books that made him famous, though. Basically,
even counting some of his lesser books and his short stories, he's not even close to 20.
Right.
So there's so my friend Eric, he wrote 12 books in a year, and right now it's like I just can't write. He's lucky enough that his books do well enough that he can, he doesn't work. That's what he does. But, he kind of burned himself out for a little bit, and he's got to take some time to rejuvenate. So there's something real. Now, George R.R. Martin, he's got no excuse. The guy's a millionaire. He goes all over the world and does symposiums, and it's like, dude, just sit down and write a fucking book, Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so you are a independent author right now. Let's say, Chances Fire takes off. Like the whole whether it's the first trilogy, the second trilogy, some portion of it takes off. What are you as Chris Patterson, the author, going to do if all of a sudden like it blows up and then you got fucking Hollywood calling? And
that's actually a question that Deshaun Myers has too, that relates to that.
People are flashing cash in your face and saying, "Oh, we can do this and we can do that." Like, how are you going to stay grounded if that day comes? Like, what are you going to do to stay grounded?
I think there's a couple advantages to being an independently published author. There's some obvious advantages to having a publisher back you up. For me, it costs me about $2,000 every book that I publish. I pay for all of my artwork for the cover. I pay for that out of pocket. I pay for the editing.
By doing this, you retain control, though. Is that correct?
So
by doing this, you retain an amount of control, right?
I have 100% control over my book, where a publisher might give you an advance. A publisher is going to pay for the cover artwork, the editing, but they control your work. And in some cases, I know other authors that they didn't really read their contract, and they in essence don't own their intellectual property anymore.
Yeah, fuck that.
So there's a pro and a con, right? I mean, for me, I labeled my, A Chance Beginning, Dark Winds, and Breaking the Flame, my first 3 books. They were labeled Christian fantasy. I actually sat down with a old pastor of mine and asked him about, can I label this as Christian fantasy? And we came to the conclusion I could. But there was some language in there, not a whole lot, but I dropped the F-bomb a couple times, and it was interesting. I had probably within the span of 3 or 4 days, I had 5 readers email me, all readers who picked up my book because they were looking for Christian fantasy.
Okay.
And they said they really liked my book, but the one thing that kind of, I guess, I'm trying to remember what they said, that kind of irritated them was the language. Well, for me, it's not a big, the F word or I make up some word. It doesn't matter to me. So I went in, changed it. We're talking 4 words, 5 words in the whole manuscript. Used a different word, flaming instead of fucking, or dung instead of shit. Again, it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't change the meaning, and I'm able to upload that right away. And now someone who isn't reading it from some sort of religious perspective, they still get the intent, they still get the content, and someone who is, they don't feel like they're reading something that they shouldn't be reading.
I think that raises a great question too. Like, when you talk about creating your art, and if you're going to kind of put yourself within kind of like that specific genre, by calling it Christian fantasy, like, are you going to create your art with the intent of placating the audience, or are you going to create your art first and then like how do you? Because see, like, obviously, like, for me, I wouldn't have that problem. I'd be like, I'm sorry you didn't like me saying fuck, but people in real life say fuck, right?
Sure.
That's but for you, that'd be a little bit different because you're kind of putting yourself within that scope. So when you're under the microscope like that, like, what is that like as an artist to
anytime
to placate the artist, or excuse me, to placate the audience? Excuse me.
I mean, anytime anytime an author puts their book in a specific browse category, okay, and it doesn't have to be a religiously oriented one. It could be military fantasy.
Sure.
It could be historical fantasy. The audience, generally speaking, is going to encounter that book from a certain perspective, right? This is what I'm thinking now. Within, say, Christian fantasy, there is a wide range of work within that browse category. You have books like mine that have an underlying Christian message, in that there's clear-cut good and evil. You have characters that are experiencing some sort of Christ-like redemption. My main character is monotheistic and religious belief, and again, I don't overly talk about it, but when it comes up, that is what is there. And to be honest, I mean, one of the reasons why I put my book in Christian fantasy was not to jade the audience, but epic fantasy has thousands upon thousands of titles listed as epic fantasy.
Absolutely.
So I was a best-selling author in Christian fantasy. I was a best-selling author in Arthurian fantasy. I was a best-selling author in military fantasy. I didn't even break the top 100 in epic fantasy, right? Because it's so much more saturated. And so I think, yes, you have to write to your audience if you want an audience. And I don't care what anyone says. Anyone who's an artist wants to make money with their art. Okay, I reject the notion when people are like, "Oh, I'm just a musician and I'm okay starving." I call complete bullshit. Okay, if you could make money as an artist, you're going to make money as an artist. Okay,
respect.
And
I
so,
respect that.
You have to write to your audience, but you also have to remember that you can't just label your work. It would be like Tupac going out and labeling an album as heavy metal, right? People are going to quickly realize that you're just blowing smoke up people's ass. And so, that's one of the reasons I made those changes. And I agree with you, Jason. And that's one of the reasons why I felt okay labeling my work as Christian fantasy. The people who are engaging in quote unquote non-Christian activity in my books are, people who are struggling with some of those redemption issues or character issues, and that's pretty much every single character in my book. So it's like, yeah, even people who are religious use swear words and do things that they know they shouldn't do. Now, at the end of the day, using the F word or using some other word doesn't matter to me, so I was okay making that change because I knew that it would broaden my audience. And I want to make money from my books. And so, it broadened my audience in that. And I also, as a fantasy author, I get the question, oh, it must be young adult. Apparently, every fantasy author is a young adult author, according to the
get fucked with that bullshit.
It's like everybody has a podcast.
Right. So I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chris. Finish.
It does broaden my audience in that sense that a parent might feel more comfortable with their 13-year-old reading my book if it doesn't drop the F-bomb 4 or 5 times. that Christian audience is more likely to receive my book, and receive it and want to continue to read it. And I think the general audience, the general reading audience, doesn't care one way or the other. There's very few people that have said to me, "Oh, I don't understand why, this character isn't like just dropping F-bombs in this place." I've never had that, but I've had people be like, "Wow, maybe I'm wondering if you could use some different language here." And I'm like, "Yeah, it doesn't bother me." And so.
Well, and I wanted to, especially when you made that comment about, you must be an author for like the youth, basically, because it's fantasy in general, right?
Yeah.
So there's a series out there. It's called Warhammer 40K.
Yeah.
And so there's the original Warhammer series, which is a lot more fantasy based, and you have Warhammer 40K, which is very futuristic. I'm talking like massively into the future. Like 40K is the year 40,000. So like we live in the year 2021. Like for them, it's millennium like 41, basically.
Yeah, we call it sci-fi war opera.
Right. So there's one book.
I like that sci-fi war opera.
For all they have table games. They've got miniature figurines that people paint. I'm talking like there's a whole goddamn smorgasbord out there in this universe. It's basically like it's like the Star Wars universe times 10.
That's what.
Like, shit.
That's that thing that Henry Cavill keeps on talking about. Henry Cavill's he's a huge fan.
So I was in the field. I was a private. This is back when I was still a mechanic. This is before I went over to the infantry. And one of my fellow mechanics threw a book down on my bunk because I was complaining because we went to the field and I'd forgotten to pack a book. Dude fucking throws his book onto my goddamn my cot in the tent. He's like, when you get downtime, like check it out. Well, I was in the field and I got like 3 chapters into that bitch and I was like, oh my God. And like no shit, to this day, it is one of my favorite books of all time. Now here's the caveat. Here's the warning. That is the only Warhammer 40K book I have ever liked. I've actually tried to read several others. I actually get more from reading the Wikipedia, like the wiki. Like there's a 40K like Wikipedia page where it's like everything in the 40K universe. I enjoy reading the wiki more than I enjoy reading the books. But this one book was so good, it just got me so into the story. You know what I mean? Like it just the author sucked me in.
Well, that's very.
Go ahead, Chris.
That's very common with those kinds of books. We call them popcorn fantasy.
Right.
It's like popcorn romance.
Correct.
And there's a very formulaic method to almost any romance book, and there's a very formulaic method to, you got Warhammer 40K, you have Ravenloft, you have Dragonlance, you have Forgotten Realms, and these are all universes that are based on. Now they're not considered lit. RPG lit, but they're based on a gaming system, right? And the problem with those is that you have a lot of different authors writing within the same universe. So, like Forgotten Realms, you have R.A. Salvatore, who is an amazing author. So the stuff that he writes for Forgotten Realms is amazing. Margaret Weiss is the same way. She writes Dragonlance, but she's also got some stuff that's her own stuff. And then you get some authors that just, quite frankly, they're not very good, and they're writing in this formulaic method. And hats off to them for being willing to write within the confines of this universe that's been created for them. But it's very popcorny. It's very
it's fan fiction. It's fan fiction.
Exactly, it is. It's exactly.
You're writing fan fiction for a universe that was created outside of your own scope, and if you're good enough at it, the publishing company will say, "We'll take that story and we'll put your name on it, and here you go. You're now you're now an author in this particular universe or whatever." But it's basically fan fiction. Like, have you ever thought about writing fan fiction? Like, have you ever seen like the people that like they send requests for that shit? Like, write me a story about X, Y, and Z, whatever.
I'm a sucker for that stuff.
I've never had someone request something like that, but I've thought about trying to write for like Forgotten Realms and stuff like that. And I just, I kind of encounter it the same way every time I think about making extra money as an Uber driver. You know, it's like, okay, am I gonna put extra time into that, or am I gonna put my energy into this fantasy world I've created, this historical fiction world that I've created, which I'm working on also. I am working on a young adult urban fantasy series. You know, those are my passions. Those are the worlds that I'm building. I'd rather spend my time on that. I mean, I think there's definitely, again, as an author who wants to make money, there's some real capital opportunity, business opportunity in writing that fan fiction. But it's just not for me. I don't, you know, I don't want someone to dictate to me, you know, what I, you know, this is the world that I have to write within. I would rather be the one that create. I mean, that's why I'm an author. I'm an author because, you know, I would read books and I would envision this world, and I started thinking, man, how cool would it be for someone to read my book and try to envision my world, you know, and my job is now to create such a vivid reality through my books that you picture the world that I've created and you do it accurately, you know. So that's kind of where I'm at in terms of why I write, and you know.
So Deshaun Myers is asking, do you see yourself straying away from letting your books become movies or TV shows because of common misadaptations of your story, or do you feel like if they want to do it, are you down for a nice paycheck? If you are down for a paycheck, are you okay with how they may change how your books may be received by the general public?
Hell yeah, dude! Give me that money for a TV show. Look, I think everyone, you know, I've gotten to a place where I really enjoy the Lord of the Rings movies. I really enjoy the Hobbit movies. I enjoy the Chronicles of Narnia movies. I really, really like the Game of Thrones series up until the very last season, which kind of bummed me out a little bit. You know, I think that most people encounter movies and series. The Witcher series, again, has some liberal adaptations. I've read a couple of, there's I think 4 or 5 Witcher books, and I've read 2 of them that are a combination of a bunch of short stories. You know, I think most people watch a TV show or watch a movie with understanding that it's based on the book that it's covering, but not necessarily exactly like the book. And so, I mean, what an amazing opportunity for someone. And the reality is, you know, with Game of Thrones, for instance, Game of Thrones up until it got to the point where the books stopped and the producers of the series had to then create the story after that, it was close enough. And because you now have Amazon Prime and Netflix and Fubo and these independent streaming services creating their own series, you know, like the Witcher is done by Netflix. I think more and more we're going to see storylines being picked up by, you know, Amazon Prime and Netflix and produced, which I think gives more of an opportunity for a more true telling of your story. So, like, let's just say let's say Netflix did pick me up, and they decided that they were going to do 1 season per book, which is pretty close to what HBO did with a Game of Thrones. Not exactly, but pretty close. You know, I mean, A Chance Beginning, my first book, done over 5 to 8 episodes, you'd definitely be able to get a more true telling of the book versus trying to cram it all into a 2-hour movie. You know,
that's been the argument for The Dark Tower for years, fucking years with Stephen King. That's been the argument, is like, instead of trying to make a fucking movie, it needs a miniseries because it's so goddamn deep, basically.
Well, that's what they're talking about with the Lord of the Rings. They're now talking about, I've heard that they're talking about doing a miniseries,
right?
That is the Lord of the Rings, because
I think it's
you know, the
already
movies
being
are
filmed.
great. Exactly. Yeah, they're just, you get a more true telling of the story. So
absolutely, it's fucking badass.
So before we're hitting our time, before we close shop, I didn't forget about your meme. I just wanted to ask. I just wanted to ask a couple questions real quick. One, do you still play? Do you still play? You still play music?
Oh yeah. I'm guitar and bass. Every once in a while, I bring I get some kid playing his guitar at school, and I'm like, "Oh, you play guitar?" I'm like, "Yeah, I play guitar too," and they don't believe me, so I bring my guitar and I got to show them up. But I've been playing guitar since I was 7, so I'm 40, sorry. So I've been playing it for 33 years. I primarily just play in church now. We got a worship praise team that I play in a couple times every month.
We actually had an interesting conversation about sec music just a couple days ago. Me and Jay, we just had a really interesting conversation about it. How a lot of that music is still really good, and it's quite catchy, and the rhythms on it really pull you in.
Well, I remember, I was going to say I think a lot of those artists are, again, kind of like a Christian author who's trying to reach a much broader audience.
Yeah.
Right. I don't want to just read. I don't just want to reach one audience. I want to reach a very broad audience. And so, you have artists like Switchfoot and Skillet, Lauren Daigle. These are artists who are being played on mainstream, but they started off as praise and worship artists, and I think that's a good thing. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, and look, I know we're nearing our end time here. I've seen this as an author. The moment you label your stuff, I mean, if we could just not label anything, we would be fine. The moment you label your stuff, it's either not enough or it's too much. Like Christian fantasy, I've had people go, I feel like you're preaching at me, and I mean that's the last thing I want to do, and I feel like I don't do that. But then I've also had Christian readers are like, this is in no way is this Christian fantasy, you're a heretic, and that's going to be similar with any browse category. If you label your work as epic fantasy, it's in epic fantasy, and I had one guy tell me this is anything but epic, and I'm like, okay, cool, thanks, fuck you. It's like but you're going to get those criticisms no matter what. It is what it is. It's part of the process. So,
John, I don't mean to like backtrack a little bit, but
no.
When Chris was talking about playing the guitar, man, like there's a song, like me and Chris, when growing up together, we did I'd spend the night at his house, he'd spend the night at my house, like we're kids, whatever. But there's a song that I used to make him play because he played it for me one time, and like I fell in love with this fucking song, and it's called Malagueña. Okay. And so like. If I ever meet anyone and they fucking play like acoustic guitar, I'll be like, hey, can you play Malagueña? And fucking I use that one song because the song is kind of a I don't want to say it's like a teaching song, but it's used as a teaching song for like finger picking and stuff like that. And Chris mastered that song at a very young age, and so the first time he played it for me, like it was fucking music to my ears, right? And I was like,
awesome.
So every time I go over to his fucking house, or if he had his fucking guitar in the goddamn locker room, I'd be like, "Hey, bro, play fucking Malagueña," right? Like, and like that was like the litmus test, basically. Like, so like when I meet people that play acoustic guitar, because everybody plays a fucking guitar, I'm like, "Hey, can you play Malagueña?" Like just to be a dick, because most of them can't. Like they'll just say, "Oh, I've never heard of it." Never. I'm like, bullshit. You never fucking heard of Malagueña.
I'm gonna take the time and I'm gonna learn that song. I'm gonna take.
You need to listen to it. I'm telling you,
I got this one over here. I got another one over there.
It's a beautiful song. Just by itself, it's just a beautiful song. But the fact that he was, oh Christ, Chris, how old would we have been? 13, 14 fucking years old, probably. Like 13, 14 years old was the first time I heard it, and I heard Chris play it, and I fell in love with that song. And so now that's like that specific song is my litmus test. And people say like, "Oh, I've never heard of it." I'm like, "Well, guess you're not much of an acoustic guitar player then, are you?"
That's amazing. That's funny.
It's a pretty standard. If you're playing any type of Spanish or Western flavored acoustic guitar, that song is a fucking staple.
Yeah.
That song is like
It's like
legitimately.
I respect
it's like
it.
the Stairway to Heaven to acoustic guitar. You know.
That's exact. That thank you, Chris.
I respect it.
It's exact. I've looked into it. Like it is exact. It is the Stairway to Heaven of acoustic guitar playing. So anytime I talk to somebody about playing acoustic guitar and I've never heard of that song, I'm like, you're full of fucking shit, dude. Like you've totally heard that song. You can't play it because you fucking suck. Fuck you.
But
you know?
it's cool. It's interesting that we talk about like how religious music is still moving, because I've said this before. My favorite band, Thrice, who actually have like a strong following in Arizona as well, because they're from they're from California. They have a strong following there. The singer Dustin Kendrew actually lived in Arizona for a long time because he joined the Mars Church. I don't know the full name.
That'd be Mars Hill.
Mars Hill. So he was with Mars Hill for a while, and he was actually doing a lot of very unique, beautiful religious music that I'm still actually a huge fan of. You know, especially for those days when I'm feeling down. You know, Dustin Kendrew really rises it up, and it's very interesting that you say that, because authors they do try to find a broader audience, and that's exactly what Dustin Kendrew was trying to do through his music.
Sure.
So it was very interesting. The next question I have: do you still power lift, and what is the heaviest you've lifted?
Yeah. So I do still power lift. I actually just recently I have to get imaging on Wednesday. I think I tore the labrum in my right shoulder, which is basically the meniscus of your shoulder. I did my left shoulder a couple years ago, got surgery on it. It's a really quick and easy surgery now. It's all laparoscopic, and it feels great. So I'm not as bummed out about it as I was when I did my left shoulder. My left shoulder, I was like, and you know, Jason knows I broke my arm probably 18 years ago, 17 years ago, and that was devastating because you know,
he did that. He did that in the wrestling room, by the way. Like he was showing some young wrestlers a certain move, and he planted his hand the wrong way, and he ended up with a spiral fracture in his was it right bicep or right arm? I'm sorry.
Right humerus, yeah. So
humerus, spiral fracture is fucking humorous. So
when I did my shoulder, I was thinking, oh man, this is, and I recovered really fast, and so anyways, if my right shoulder is kind of jacked up, it's about a 2 to 3 month recovery, so it's not too bad. But I still lift a lot. One of the things that I now teach, I'm traditionally an English and history teacher, but when I changed jobs, when I went into a different school district, I started teaching health, which was really, really cool. And I think definitely in the veteran space, a lot of people would appreciate that. A lot of health is, I used to tell kids, health used to be how to wash your testicles in sex ed. And now health is, I would say probably 3/5 of my health class was devoted to mental health. So
that is amazing.
So that was really cool, and that was really fun, and helped me grow as a teacher. But now my job is all strength and conditioning. I'm one of the strength and conditioning coaches at the high school that I coach and teach at. And so my best bench press ever in competition was 405, although I did 405 for 5 reps at one point, and my best competition deadlift was 700 pounds, and my best competition squat was 600. I actually am now an old man. I squatted 550 the other day, and I deadlifted 675 not too long ago. So,
hey, just for clarification, for anybody that thought, if you're a fan of the podcast, if you thought I wasn't fucking around about being from fucking Tucson, Arizona, like this is my fucking bro. Like we've kept each other in each other's orbits for a long time for reasons. Like that's my fucking bro right there. Like that's my fucking brother. So what the fuck do you got with yours? Like
yeah, I like powerlifting. I like lifting. Did a little bodybuilding, but that was very short lived. But I enjoy I enjoy strength sports. I enjoy combat sports. Do a little bit of jiu-jitsu here and there. My kids are in jiu-jitsu and wrestling. Um, so yeah.
That's good. I see John. I see John put the meme up. Like that's a meme for it's Shia LaBeouf, obviously, like just smiling all happy with glassy eyes, and it says when you see your homies doing good, and that's like every time I see Chris, my brother, our brother Pablo, our brother Mark, like we've got a lot of friends, man. Like when you see your fucking buddies doing good, man, like you just proud as fuck. So that's fucking dude. It was awesome talking to you today, man. Like this was a lot of fun. This was a lot of fun.
Yep. And before we hit the final thought, I just want to throw in just one announcement. Check with my new production venture. It's called Clean Sanchez Productions. Haha. The No, just want to promote that I am producing a podcast with Joe Poe and Kobalis. They are the host of this venture called The Late Brunch. Check it out on Apple and Spotify and Anchor. Also, if you guys listen or watch the podcast, we are heard on 35 states in the United States and over 11 countries around the world. Let us know where you're from. Hit us up. Leave a comment. Subscribe. Tell us what you think of the show. Tell us what you don't like about the show. And Jay, if you'd like to announce our guest for next week.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you want me to just segue into the final thought from there? Or?
Yeah. And I just want to say, Chris, I appreciate you coming on today. This was very truly interesting for me as someone who's not into that realm of stories, but it's interesting to get into the mind of someone who creates that world. One thing that I thought was very interesting about what you write is that you've created a whole lore around this. On your website, there's a map. I don't want to mispronounce the Hathlegane. Hathgelthane. I'm a sucker, and I'm such a fan for worlds created around stories and everything that goes around it. So I wish you much success. I'm very happy that you came today, and truly grateful that you were here to tell us about your processes and your stories. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you guys, and I know that both of you guys are veterans, and a lot of the people that watch your podcast are veterans, and I can't thank you enough for the service and sacrifice that you guys have given our country. I tell people all the time that I didn't have the balls to do that.
And I don't believe that for a second, and you didn't miss a fucking thing.
So, well, I just, I think that it's awesome. Unfortunately, I feel like sometimes our government uses our military folks, and then once they're done, they're done. And so I am incredibly proud of Jason, and I'm
your
happy.
Brother, your brother too. Let's not forget Dan.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, I'm just happy that there's you guys are reaching out to other veterans and the general public, and kind of giving your story, and I think that's awesome because, like I said, I just even though Jason mentioned that things have changed since 9/11 a little bit, but there's still people out there that just don't understand what it's like to, including myself, to serve, to be in the military, to devote that major portion of your life to service. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris. So so next week we have another bona fide guest coming that will be coming live from Tucson, Arizona. This is going to be, his name is Pablo Martinez. He was featured on the TV show, what is it, Forged in Fire, right?
Forged in Fire. Which
Fire.
We got to watch the episode, which blew your mind.
I had actually, John, when you were in Kansas City last week, we actually watched the episode together. We bought it off Amazon. We watched the episode. I remember Pablo talking to me about it when he was going through it, but I had never seen it. So I finally sat down and watched the episode, and Pablo, along with Chris, these are like two of my best friends, and the three of us we're kind of like a little trifecta for several years.
A trifecta of success.
More like a trifecta of terror, I think.
Oh man, he's frozen like ice.
That's probably
so. You froze a second, Jay. You may have to say what you said again because you froze a second.
I was saying Chris was correct. Like, it was more of a trifecta of terror. Like, we were young and we were still discovering ourselves, and we were who we were. And so
I love it.
If you were good with us, you were good, and if we didn't like you, I'm sorry. All I can say is I'm sorry. 20 years later, all I can say is I'm sorry because we probably were not good to you, right? So,
asshole pride.
Not gonna. Yeah, asshole pride. Like, oh yeah. By the way, John, John, I gotta mention, you've heard Chris refer to me as Jason like multiple times on this podcast. Like,
yeah.
This is one of those guys I told you about. Like, Chris is on a very short list of people. Like, I will allow people to call me Jason.
I know.
If they've known me long enough, the minute somebody knows my name is Jason and they call me Jason, I correct them. I'm like, excuse me, I go by Jay.
I just found out from a phone call a couple weeks ago. From a caller ID.
You didn't even know my actual name is Jason. Like, my actual name is Jason, and you know, like, Chris is on a very short list where, like, I will not correct him from calling me Jason. Like, he knows me as Jason, and that's it. It's like my family. Like, that's how tight it is. So next week we got Pablo. Chris, thank you very, very much. Like, holy shit, man, it's always a pleasure. Always a pleasure, and I definitely look forward to Arizona next time. Next time we get down there. So
I almost forgot, Jay. I almost forgot. For 10% off your next order of Rogue Energy. Oh, where's the camera? Whoops. I moved the camera today. Use code DD214 Gaming for 10% off your order today. There are many, many different flavors. Make sure you get it today. Also, make sure you use code DD214 Gaming for $5 off your next art commission from Cobalis Designs. Also, don't forget to check out veteran-owned business Blaze Online.
That's right. If you're doing the Rogue Energy, that shit will make you fucking hear colors and see sounds, ladies and gentlemen. You fucking blast a rail of that shit and go hit the gym. You're going to be fucking like hitting personal bests every fucking day. So drink that shit. Use it. All right? That's what's up. Thank you for our sponsor, fucking Rogue Affiliate. Roger that. All right, so final thoughts. I just want to update a couple things on the situation in Afghanistan. As of about 2 hours ago, they told everybody to shelter in place. Anybody that's Western, basically, to shelter in place. The embassy is officially closed. All right. Taliban entered the presidential palace in Kabul about 2 hours ago. And as of about 10 minutes ago, there's a Taliban official that says they will soon declare the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan from the presidential palace in Kabul. Ladies and gentlemen, the war in Afghanistan is officially over. All right, so thoughts and prayers, I guess, if you're the thinking or praying type, for all the people that are still there. And while we're on that topic, I just want to, as we do every week with our final thought, I want to encourage everybody. If you're having certain feelings about all this going down and you're having certain feelings about certain things, maybe it was your service, maybe it was you're questioning reality, and was it worth it? Was it in vain? X, Y, and Z, whatever's going through your head right now. I want to encourage you guys to reach out to your battle brothers and battle sisters. I want to encourage you guys to reach out to your family members, your loved ones. Me and Chris, I know I can call Chris. Chris knows he can call me. 2:30 in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. It doesn't matter. I want to encourage people that are on the receiving end of a phone call. Answer your fucking phones, okay? If you're getting a phone call at 2 or 3 in the morning, yeah, you might be getting drunk dialed, but you know what? Sometimes people just want to hear a friendly voice. So answer your fucking phones, okay? Please don't make a decision in the spur of the moment that you can't take back, okay? I know John's experienced it. I've experienced it. When we lose people, we lose them for good, and we don't really get that time back. So pretty pleased with sugar on top. If you're feeling a certain way, especially on a day like today, where Afghanistan is probably going to be announced that it has officially fallen within the next 2 hours, please be responsible. If you happen to be ingesting this particular drug right here, I want to remind everybody to wait until you sober up before you make any hasty decisions. Okay? That drug is probably very loosely tied to a lot of indirect deaths that probably would not have occurred if said person had probably just slept it off and sobered up in the morning. So please be responsible out there. Please make phone calls. National Suicide Prevention Hotline, 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255. All right? Please reach out. Talk to somebody. It's okay to get your feelings out. I've said it many times before on this podcast. I've been seeing a therapist for the last 2 years. I talk to somebody. All right? I'm Staff Sergeant in the United States Army. I have a therapist, okay, for reasons, because I'm not afraid, to understand that I needed something else. I needed some help in my life that I wasn't getting in my regular life. So I went and saw a therapist. So therapists are freaking a lot cheaper than funerals. So please be responsible. Please be responsible drinking. We hope all of you guys have a great week ahead. We look forward to having our next guest, our guest next week, Pablo. Chris, again, thank you very, very much for your time. This was very enlightening and eye-opening, and it was really fun, like hearing you kind of philosophize on the writing game and how you have approached it in the last several years. So thank you very, very much for that. So appreciate it, guys. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Until next time, ladies and gentlemen.